Our special guest is David Freiheit. I hope I'm saying Freiheit. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. God damn it. He's better known as Viva Frei, right? And he is a Canadian lawyer and former political candidate for the People's Party of Canada. He gained popularity on YouTube, which is where I found out about him, for his legal commentaries going by the pseudonym Viva Frei. He now posts content exclusively to Rumble. Well, welcome to the show, David.
Jimmy, thank you for having me on. I like to say failed political candidate because I never had a chance of winning.
Okay.
But I certainly made some debate public.
But wait, Fry, do you think it was because you have FTX hair?
No, my FTX hair, it wasn't that bad at the time. When I saw Sam Bankman-Fried, I'm like, let the jokes start coming in. They have to.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to talk to you for many reasons. And certain people would consider us, we would be not the same politically, right? Well, how would you describe yourself politically, David?
I stopped using the false dichotomy of liberal versus conservative, Democrat versus Republican. I'm going by red-pilled versus blue-pilled. The blue pill still think the government is good and does good, and the red pill knows that they systematically experiment on their own people, get people into wars, are corrupt liars, just like so many other people out there. I'm thoroughly red-pilled, and people can deduce from that what they will. But by no means do I support child-affirming care that involves the removal of genitalia from, distraught children. So if that politically orients me, that's where I am. But red-pilled.
Well, I'm for that, but I'm against children being able to go to tanning beds until they're 16 because that's the law, and I think we should keep that. But we should let them do the other.
Right. You can't go tanning or buy.
You can't even go tanning. But anyway,
no drinking, no tattoos because that's too permanent. But call something that is otherwise child genital mutilation. Call it gender-affirming care. Give it a nice euphemism, and then you become a bigot for not supporting it.
Well, that'll cheer them up.
There's lots of big debates happening about this topic for sure, but let's first talk about Justin Trudeau, right? Because that's a no winning on that topic, right? I always say, like, they always ask me about transgendered athletes, and I'm like, I'll compete against any transgendered men with one hand tied behind my back.
Yeah, it doesn't come up ever.
Never comes up.
Hey, these trans men are killing us out here.
Boy, another trans man. He is NFL's best quarterback. No, that's never going to happen. But a trans woman often competes, and I say that I don't have a dog in that fight. That's up to women to say stuff about that. If they don't want to compete against the trans woman, then that's for them. I don't care because I don't.
I used to say the same thing, Jimmy, but then, I mean, when you have kids and if you have daughters, then it becomes the parents', obligation, I think, to be a little more outspoken because at that point, it hasn't happened to I have two daughters and one son, but, we're getting into the realm where it might actually affect my daughter and my daughter's universe. So I think I, as a man who will never, first of all, there's some trans men, there's some females who would trans to men that I wouldn't fight in the UFC with, like Ronda Rousey. If she identifies as a male, I'm not fighting her. But
I wouldn't fight her as a woman. She's a very skilled fighter.
No, she can. I don't pretend to have any advantage in fighting when it comes to that. But that's the debate is not picking extremes. The debate is picking generalities. But anyhow, yeah, we can all agree on. I said it yesterday during my show. Everybody hates Trudeau, even liberals. And yet somehow he's
well. You should see him in full blackface, caliente. Oh, that's a hot Trudeau.
So I don't know if I could beat up Ronda Rousey, but I can certainly make her cry. Anyway, that
one may have gone over my head.
Here, let me just show you. So Justin Trudeau is, like all politicians, 100% liar, and now he's completely an enemy of his own people. And so this is one of my favorites. So when the truckers in Canada, who were, by the way, were vaccinated at a higher rate than the general population because they weren't protesting medicine, they were protesting authoritarianism, and they were right. Because that thing that they were protesting, there was no reason for it to be mandated because it doesn't stop transmission or contraction. It never did, and they lied about it. And so that takes away your scientific basis for mandates for a vaccine. They're gone. But there's also a social reason why you shouldn't do it either, because that's authoritarianism, and you're supposed to have bodily autonomy. And you cannot, and that it didn't even pass the Nuremberg trial test because we weren't fully informed about what was happening about that. And but I have to say, YouTube rules that the vaccine is safe and effective, and it will keep you from being.
It does slow the spread.
It does slow the spread. And it keeps you.
I even think.
Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure YouTube has been softening up even those rules themselves. But Jimmy, I'll adopt and ratify your rant and say only this as well. They knew at the time. It's not though, at the beginning they said it prevents transmission. When this protest went down, they knew a lot of stuff. They were already starting to confirm a lot of the old conspiracy theories that it doesn't interfere with a woman's menstrual cycle. There's no link to myocarditis. All of this was known, it had become known at the time of this protest. And nonetheless, the stubborn, petty tyrant Justin Trudeau couldn't even not just concede the points that they were going to concede in a few months anyhow, couldn't sit down, walk down, come down and talk to the protesters. But look at that smug.
And here he is. He got caught lying. I'm sure you've seen this video, but my audience hasn't. So here he is caught lying by calling the truckers racists, right? So that's the thing. So if you go against the establishment now, the first thing they do is call you a racist, then they'll call you a misogynist, then they'll call you a Nazi, then they'll call you a white supremacist, or they'll do all of them at the same time, which is what they did to me.
He's a big Ukraine guy too, by the way. Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau loves yeah. So here's him being caught lying about calling the truckers racists.
A number of people have testified in this inquiry referencing your widely published comments and calling the unvaccinated racists and misogynists. And we have heard testimony in this inquiry about how some of your officials wanted to label protesters as terrorists. Would you agree with me that one of the most important roles of a prime minister is to unite Canadians and not divide them by engaging in name calling?
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names. Mais il y a aussi des gens qui sont farouchement opposés à la.
Okay, so now here he is speaking in French, and he's gonna do that exact thing. He's gonna call.
Look at that beautiful face that he's got on right now. It's a scowl.
Here he goes. He calls them extremists. We don't believe in he called the truckers extremists who don't believe in science. They're often misogynists and also often racists. You want to hear him say it in French? Here we go.
A number of people have testified in the inquiry referencing your widely published comments and calling the unvaccinated racists and misogynists. And we have heard testimony in this inquiry about how some of your officials wanted to label protesters as terrorists. Would you agree with me that one of the most important roles of a prime minister is to unite Canadians and not divide them by engaging in name calling?
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names.
Okay, here we go.
Mais il y a aussi des gens qui sont
farouchement
opposés à la vaccination.
They're extremists.
Qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent
they don't believe in science. They're misogynists. They're racists.
Un petit groupe, mais qui prend de la place. Et là,
and we have to make a choice in terms of leaders, in terms of the country. Do we tolerate these people? Do we tolerate other citizens of our country who are responsible for trucking everything? Do we, people who haven't? So, Viva, let me just give it to you. Should I call you Viva or should I call you David?
Go with Viva. That's what I've been.
Okay.
By the way, it's one thing to say that, but he's saying it in French. That's like as bad as when Bill Clinton went to France to protest the Vietnam War. It's almost like foreign. It's extra.
So, Viva, let me just get your comment on that.
If we want to be a Weasley lawyer speak, he didn't call the unvaccinated names. He called those who opposed vaccine mandates names. Like I can think the way a dishonest tyrant would think. I didn't call the unvaccinated dirty because a lot of those truckers protesting were vaccinated.
That's right.
I was calling the anti-mandate people racists, misogynists, anti-science. But he is employing rhetoric here, which is different, but only in degree from, the Rwandan getting on the radios, cut down the tall trees. Do we tolerate these people? They take up place. And then lo and behold, I don't know if it was shortly before or shortly after this. I remember this is from Les 4 Semaines de Julie, the television show. Do we tolerate these people? Do they take up place? And then someone gets in a van and runs over 4 protesters in Winnipeg. Who would have thunk that crazies would listen to this and view it as their political permission slip to go do bad things to the people who are racist and misogynists.
And so what is the fallout of him doing that and being caught lying like this? Is there a fallout from that?
Look, I'll tell you, I don't want anyone to think I'm condoning this. In his mind, he's not lying because he didn't call them names. They were factual assessments. He wasn't referring to the unvaccinated. He was referring to the anti-government type. The ultimate irony of all of this, Jimmy, is that he's calling the anti-vax mandates the racists and the misogynists when he is telling women what to do with their bodies with respect to a medical intervention that will affect or potentially affect their bodies. And the women that fear that, they're the misogynists. This is a man telling a woman what she has to risk with her own body. This is the same guy who's pushing these vaccine mandates, implementing them, knowing that in Canada, and it's the same in the States, statistically undervaccinated Black Canadians, Latino Canadians, Indigenous Canadians. So he's implementing a policy which has a disparate impact on minorities while calling those minorities the racists for opposing his racist mandate. It's beyond hypocrisy. It is merely the accuse your enemies of doing what you are doing so as to create confusion. Joseph Goebbels would be proud.
Yes.
That is wow, that is such a great point. I didn't think about that he was actually being misogynistic because he's taking away women's bodily autonomy, and with the medical procedure that now is known to cause interruptions in their menstrual cycles, and no one knows the real consequences of that because we don't have long-term studies.
No,
and so
Jimmy,
now, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, it only causes potentially bleeding that's so heavy that some women become anemic. Oh, but what's a little interruption to your menstrual cycle, woman? Shut up and take the jab and don't be misogynist.
So he's calling those people who would like to protect women from that, he's calling them misogynists. He's calling women misogynists. I never looked at it that way. That is exactly what he's doing. And plus, he then goes on, that's a great point that you made. I used to make that when people used to demonize the unvaccinated in New York, I would point out that most of the Black and brown population were unvaccinated in New York, and that the highest rate of unvaccinated was with Black youth.
And what would they say to, because I remember saying that too, and I don't remember what people would respond to, how they would respond to it. I don't remember if it'd be the end of the conversation,
The response is the typical racist response. Shut up and take it. You don't know what's good for you. Oh, get over the Tuskegee experiments, at Black Americans.
Yeah.
Get over the residential schools, Indigenous Americans. Now the government is telling you the truth when they say we're doing it for your own good, as if they didn't say that exact same thing then. And Jimmy, in Quebec, where I'm from, when they implemented the vaccine passports, I went down to it's called a Canadian Tire. It's like a sports fishing type store. To document this, and I was trying not to get mad at the Canadian Tire employees implementing this. What did I see when I got there? There was a family. They appeared to be Nigerian, but clearly a Black family couldn't get in to Canadian Tire, this department store, because of the vaccine passport. It had a disparate impact on minorities. Now, it's sort of not tongue in cheek, but it's an argument tactic to say he's calling me racist when he's implementing what is effectively a racist policy. But I don't want to swear. He's just the most offensive hypocrite, and whatever he accuses others of doing is what he has done himself. It's just over the top.
And so when he froze people's bank accounts over the mandates and over the truckers protesting, they again, he did it against the Constitution, but then they had a hearing or whatever, they had their thing, and they decided he did do it according to the Constitution. Isn't that what happened?
I'll give the 30,000-foot overview. He invokes his 3.5 weeks of the most peaceful protest you can imagine. And I know because I went down to document it live stream, because I was actually in Florida at a Project Veritas event, and my messages are saying, "Everyone, Viva, why aren't you down in Ottawa? You got to see what's going on." I go Google this, and I go to CBC News, and they're saying Nazi flags, Confederate flags at this extremist protest. And everybody who's down there on the ground says, "Viva, get down here. This is not what's going on." So I go down just to document it. It was the most peaceful, the most orderly protest you've ever seen in your life. Veterans were not defiling the war memorial. They were salting the sidewalks, shoveling it. They had it under 24/7 surveillance. 3.5 weeks where peace and love like Woodstock in winter. Justin Trudeau doesn't bother to acknowledge the protesters whatsoever. We found out later why. does nothing except hopes that something violent occurs. And when I was down there, I was asking cops, have you seen any vandalism? Have you seen any violence? And they said, no, 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 and no. And then one cop as a joke said, oh, yeah, actually, there's a broken window over there. And I was like, okay, cool. Where? I'll go see. And he says, just joking. It wasn't the protesters. 3.5 weeks. Nothing bad happens whatsoever except for the gridlock of a downtown core of the capital of Canada. Justin Trudeau invokes the Emergencies Act when they were on the cusp of a negotiated settlement with the truckers in any event. We now know this. The Emergencies Act is the replacement for the War Measures Act, which Trudeau's father also invoked and abused during the FLQ crisis in the late 70s, when there were actual bad things like, the Quebec separatists were setting off pipe bombs in mailboxes. They actually kidnapped a politician. Another politician was killed. So they invoked the War Measures Act then, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and his dad abused of it the same way Justin Trudeau did. He says, I'm not taking away any of your civil rights. I'm not bringing in the military, but he brings in a militarized police force, multiple. He brought in the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Sudbury Police, the Quebec Police, the OPP, armored vehicles, snipers on roofs, drones in the sky. I was there, beats the ever-loving hell out of many protesters, war veterans as well, and violently suppresses what was the most peaceful, beautiful protest of all time. Under this law, the Emergencies Act, when you invoke it, there has to, by law, be an inquiry into the context surrounding the invocation of the act for transparency. Justin Trudeau appoints a guy named Commissioner Rouleau, who, despite some rumors or misunderstandings, is not indirectly related to Trudeau. It's another Rouleau whose brother is Pierre. But this guy is a lifelong political player, so to speak. You know, he was involved in Liberal government back in the 80s, lifelong political player, Liberal political player. They have 6 weeks of evidentiary hearing, witnesses, all this stuff. You're supposed to invoke the Emergencies Act. Sorry, this is going to go on for a little long. You can only invoke the Emergencies Act under the law when existing laws are inadequate to respond to a national emergency. This was a localized protest in the downtown core of Ottawa, and every law that was required existed already. Nonetheless, the commissioner listens to this, and at the end says, Justin Trudeau met the threshold for invoking the Emergencies Act. Freezing of bank accounts, though unfortunate, was effective. And it's unfortunate that it caught up innocent spouses or partners who had joint bank accounts because they couldn't access their bank accounts. But I can't think of a solution to that problem, and no one proposed one, so it's unfortunate. But ordering the cancellation of insurance on vehicles, that was a step too far. I presume only because if they had canceled insurance, they wouldn't be able to drive their cars out of there legally. But everything else, ratified, exonerated, and some Canadians are just like, cheering on their own demise. Yay, the government now gets to tell me when I can protest, for how long I can protest, what measures I can implement while protesting. And if they don't like it, we're going to come in and beat the ever-loving piss out of you, freeze your bank accounts, and destroy your life. And it just got the go-ahead from Commissioner Rouleau. So
what is wrong with Canadians?
It's a good question. There are a lot who are speaking out. There are too many who are, I'm not saying stupid, relying on media. I'll say misinformed. And there are too many people who listen to the CBC, Global News, CTV News, and they think this protest was characterized by Nazi flags and violence. There's informationally illiterate, informationally ignorant. Then there is a portion of the population, very much contrary to the zeitgeist of America, which would prefer guaranteed security in a form of a prison as opposed to the risks of liberty and roaming in the wild. And so it's a philosophical question. The history of America is somewhat different in that it can explain sort of like the spirit of America. Those who move to America are looking for wild freedom, sort of the leftovers, or what's the word I'm looking for? But something along the lines of what's left over from the Wild West. You go, you forge your own destiny, and you make your own success. Canada does not have that spirit, but I think by and large they are captured by a media that is captured by a government that has, government, media, and big tech, big pharma all working together. They are in a cage and they don't even know it. And to quote Yeonmi Park, how do you expect people to fight for their own freedom if they don't know that they're captive?
The first thing necessary to escape from a prison is to realize you are in a prison. And that's what it seems like Canada is not realizing, that they are in a prison and they are being run by international capitalists. That's the prison, and it was big pharma. And I know they made one company made $100 billion off of COVID, which is enough to buy the government of Canada and their media. That's how much money it is.
They're building a Moderna. I mean, I don't know where they're at with it, but they're building a, I don't know, $50-60 million Moderna facility in Quebec, in the outskirts of Montreal, because the vaccine was so effective. I mean, the mRNA technology, which had hitherto never been implemented on humans, never really tested in this manner, it's so successful. They're investing in Moderna. And what are the odds Moderna gets this government gift? It's but it is a problem. Canadians look at America and they say, it's the gun-toting Wild West. We like being safe. We like relying on the government. And they don't understand the government does nothing better than private enterprise and is no less corrupt than their fears of corruption of private enterprise. The only thing the government does well is it gives itself a raise every time it fails. And so you have healthcare system in shambles, but nobody can really, go fully private. Police, they're going to go after pastors who oppose drag shows and drag reading to kids in libraries. But good luck getting the police to come to your place if you have a problem, and you also can't defend yourself. So it's a vicious circle, and it's sort of a black hole of basically the more you give up, the more you think you need to give up in order to have justified what you already gave up. But I don't know, people need to wake up.
So in America, the way that corporations and big pharma, military industrial complex, Wall Street has corrupted the government is through our elections. So it's all privately funded, and now corporations can spend as much as they want during our election season because of this thing called Citizens United, and that it's seen as money is seen as speech. And so we pretend we're for free speech, and so money equals speech. And so that's how and then also on top of that all the people rely on corporate money, all the politicians rely on corporate money to get elected. Not only that, but then when they leave governments like all the heads of the FDA in the United States, they all go to work for big pharma as soon as they get done being the head of the FDA, which is supposed to regulate. So that's called that's called regulatory capture too, which is widespread and in every agency in the United States. Does that similar thing happen in Canada?
The money in politics, I say to a lesser degree, although the big scandal, Jimmy, coming out of Canada now is CSIS, which is Canada's Secret Intelligence Services. It's basically like intelligence. There's a whistleblower who's leaking documents to the press. They wrote an article about how the Chinese Communist Party has literally.
We're going to talk. I have that set for later in our conversation.
Okay.
So let's just talk about the general way Canada gets corrupted.
Well, I'll say so. It's captured media and not so much big money in politics. Where Justin Trudeau, our two big public broadcasters, the CBC, Canada Broadcasting Corporation, Radio-Canada, the French version, they survive off over $1 billion in federal funding. Now, it's true, whatever federal entities in power would do the funding, unless their platform was defund the CBC, like some conservatives want to do. Then you got the bailout of the printed press in Canada, which Trudeau gave conveniently, I think it was 2018, $600 million bailout to the printed press. Then you got the COVID capture, which is COVID advertising for the digital media, where be good, cover me nicely, don't call out my scandals, like me allegedly groping a reporter back in the year 2000, the blackface, which they sat on the photos for forever, the Aga Khan scandal, where Trudeau was taking gifts from the Aga Khan Foundation, which was petitioning the federal government for tens of millions of dollars. The SNC Lavalin scandal, where he was found to be in a breach of ethics because he pressured the Minister of Justice to not pursue his cronies criminally for bribery and fraud in Libya. What was the other one? There was another one in there. The We Charity scandal. So, radio, digital media, be good to Justin Trudeau. He'll run those disgusting COVID those propaganda ads, and you'll make your money. Come election time, because Jimmy, I had my experience with this now. I was pressuring the CBC. I was like, you guys are bad-mouthing the People's Party of Canada. Why don't you just have me or the leader on, Maxime Bernier, for a debate or a discussion? And then they agree to do an interview with me that they run once on their 7:00 show, and then they don't put it up on the internet, I presume because I may have come off a little better than they might have thought I was going to come off. And so I said, look, you guys ran it at 7 a.m. I don't know who's listening to that radio station. Put it up on the internet. Like, let people see it. If you had to rely on ad revenue to exist and not government doles, maybe you'd be a little more proactive in this. It took them 5 days to get my interview back up onto the internet. They only got it on the internet the Sunday before the election. So when you capture the media, you capture the messaging, you capture what people know and what they don't know. And you give the platforms and the speaking time to the big parties, the liberals, you give it to the conservatives, and you spend your time demonizing all the other parties, and you can affect a change in the outcome that way. Much like we saw in that Time article magazine about fortifying the elections, control the flow of information. You can control the result, control what people learn and when they learn it, and you can affect the outcome of elections as they did in the States and as I'm convinced they do in Canada.
Well, in the United States, Google and Facebook control, I think, 70 or 80% of the information flow for news in America. And that's why we live that's a big reason why we have the elections we had mandates, we live in the world we live in. Well, that's another big reason why we can send $100 billion for clean water, housing, retirement, and everything over in Ukraine while we let our own country rot, which it is. It's rotting. We're rotting from the inside out. If you want to see my stand-up special, become a member at jimmydore.com. It's only $10, and come see our live stand-up comedy in Los Angeles, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, St. Paul, Honolulu, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, and more.